Have you ever stopped to count how many things you own that you don't actually need? In a world that constantly pushes us to chase more money, more possessions, more status, it's easy to forget that true contentment might lie in the opposite direction. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." That simple idea flips everything we've been taught about success on its head. What if the secret to fulfillment isn't accumulation but subtraction? Today, we're exploring 26 revealing Stoic insights that prove less is more when it comes to building a meaningful life. From the power of intentional minimalism to the freedom of letting go, these timeless principles will challenge the way you think about what it means to have enough. Whether you're new to Stoicism or already familiar with its teachings, this journey will give you practical tools to cut through the noise of modern excess and rediscover what really matters. Ready to redefine fulfillment? Let's begin. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's greatest Stoic thinkers, often reminded himself in his personal journal that true wealth lies not in possessions but in appreciation. He wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." That simple shift in perspective from wanting more to valuing what we already have is the foundation of Stoic contentment. The modern world bombards us with messages that happiness comes from the next purchase, the next upgrade, the next milestone. But the Stoics argued that fulfillment isn't about acquiring more, it's about realizing we already have enough. Epictetus put it bluntly, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Imagine two people standing before the same sunset, one frantically trying to capture it on their phone, the other simply soaking it in. One is distracted by the chase for more, the other finds richness in presence. This isn't about rejecting ambition or living in scarcity. It's about recognizing when the pursuit of more starts draining the joy from what's already here. So here's a challenge. Where in your life do you feel that restless tug toward accumulation? Maybe it's the overflowing closet, the endless scroll of online shopping, or the gnawing sense that you should be further ahead. What if, just for today, you paused and named one thing, just one, that you already have in abundance? Epictetus drew a line that changed everything. He called it the Dichotomy of Control. Some things are up to us, our choices, our efforts, our attitudes, and some things simply aren't: the weather, other people's opinions, the past. But here's the twist: we suffer most when we blur that line, wasting energy trying to change what's outside our power while neglecting what's within it. Marcus Aurelius put it this way: the obstacle becomes the way. When life throws delays, setbacks, or frustrations at us, the Stoics didn't see walls, they saw doors. Think about traffic. You can't control the red lights or the gridlock, but you can control whether that time feels stolen or gifted. Maybe it's 20 minutes to listen to an inspiring podcast or simply to sit in silence. That shift from fighting what you can't change to using it is where life gets lighter. So here's a practice. Grab a piece of paper and write down 3 things that weigh on you but aren't truly yours to fix. Maybe it's a family member's choices, the stock market, or how your boss responds to your ideas. Then ask yourself, what happens if, just for today, you let those go and pour that energy into something you can influence? That's the Stoic art of subtraction, cutting the clutter of worry to make room for meaningful action. How often do you mistake busyness for productivity? We fill our days with endless tasks, notifications, and obligations, convinced that doing more means achieving more. But the Stoics saw right through this illusion. Seneca warned, "You are living as if destined to live forever." How much of your time has been stolen by distractions? Time isn't just money, it's your actual life slipping away in fragments. The ancient solution, subtraction, not doing less but doing what matters by cutting the noise. Think of Michelangelo chiseling away marble to reveal David his masterpiece wasn't built by adding, but by removing everything that wasn't essential. Today, we call this a digital detox, but Marcus Aurelius practiced it centuries ago by routinely stepping back from Rome's chaos to reflect in stillness. Here's the challenge. For the next 24 hours, try a distraction fast. Silence non-essential notifications, resist the urge to multitask, and notice what happens when you stop scattering your attention. Does your mind feel clearer? Do conversations deepen? That space you've created isn't empty, it's where purpose starts to speak. Because as Seneca reminds us, life is long if you know how to use it. So ask yourself, what's one thing you could remove today to make room for what truly deserves your focus? There's an old Zen story about a child building sandcastles by the sea, each one carefully crafted, each one swept away by the tide. At first, the child cries, but by afternoon, they're laughing, watching their creations dissolve into the waves. That's the paradox of impermanence. What once felt like loss becomes liberation. The Stoics called this amor fati, the love of fate, not just accepting but embracing that nothing lasts. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "All that you see will soon perish, and those who witness that perishing will soon perish too." At first glance, that might sound bleak, but look deeper. When we stop clinging to things or even to versions of ourselves, we stop suffering their inevitable passing. Think of decluttering your home, that old sweater you haven't worn in years. Letting it go doesn't just clear space in your closet, it lightens your mind. Now imagine applying that same release to emotions, to expectations, to the constant chase for more. What if, like the child at the shore, you could admire what you have without fearing its loss? Here's a question to sit with. Picture your life without three things you think define you: a job title, a possession, even a relationship. Would their absence hollow you out, or would you find, like the Stoics, that you're still standing? The sandcastle wasn't the point, the joy of building it was. Imagine stepping into the quiet of an ancient Stoic study. No buzzing phones, no pinging notifications, just the rustle of parchment and the space to think. Now fast forward to today, screens blaring, headphones blasting, a world that treats silence like emptiness to be filled. Seneca warned about this exact tension in his letters, writing, "Noise is a distraction that shakes the spirit, but silence is the workshop of the soul." For the Stoics, quiet wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the birthplace of clarity. Epictetus took it further, urging his students to guard their mental space like a fortress gate, because what floods in unchecked shapes who you become. Consider the CEO who starts each day not with emails, but with stillness, just 5 minutes staring out the window, letting thoughts settle like sediment in a glass of water. That small ritual isn't laziness, it's the sharpening of the axe before cutting the tree. Today, we call it mindfulness, but the principle is timeless. Noise scatters, silence gathers. Here's the experiment tomorrow. Before you reach for your phone or speak your first word, steal 5 minutes of pure quiet. Sit by a window, watch the light change, and notice what bubbles up when you stop drowning it out. Is it uncomfortable at first? Probably, but so was the first time you lifted a weight or ran a mile. Silence, like any muscle, strengthens with use, and in that space you might just hear the whisper of what truly matters. What does the word need really mean in your life? Take a moment. Would your list include the latest smartphone, that extra pair of shoes, or the upgrade you've been eyeing? The Stoics drew a line in the sand between needs and wants, not to punish desire but to free us from its grip. Musonius Rufus, often called the Roman Socrates, put it plainly: the body needs little: food, shelter, basic covering, and nothing beyond that is truly necessary. That might sound extreme until you consider Diogenes, who lived in a barrel and owned nothing but a wooden bowl, and saw a child drinking water with cupped hands and threw even that away. His radical simplicity wasn't about deprivation. It was a masterclass in realizing how little we actually require to be content. Today, we don't have to sleep in barrels to practice this wisdom, but we can start by auditing where the line between necessity and excess has blurred. Pick one category, your wardrobe, your subscriptions, even your pantry, and ask what here is truly needed. You might find, like the Stoics, that stripping away the extras doesn't leave you empty, it leaves you light. Because fulfillment isn't about having everything you want, it's about wanting what you already have. Ever notice how the most breathtaking poems often follow strict meter, or how the simplest ingredients can inspire the most inventive meals? The Stoics knew this paradox well, that limits don't stifle creativity, they fuel it. They practiced voluntary discomfort, like wearing thin clothes in winter or sleeping on the floor, not as punishment, but to prove how little we actually need to thrive. Seneca put it this way: set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare. At first, that might sound like deprivation, but look closer. It's a masterclass in resourcefulness. Think of a painter limited to just 3 colors, or a musician composing with only 4 notes. The constraint doesn't crush their art, it forces them to dig deeper, to see possibilities where others see lack. Even today, some of the most groundbreaking innovations come from places with scarce resources, like hospitals in developing countries repurposing everyday objects into medical tools. So here's an invitation: try a no-spend day, not as an exercise in penny pinching, but as a way to rediscover the abundance hidden in plain sight. Cook with what's already in your pantry. Walk instead of driving. Notice how your mind starts to solve problems differently when the easy options are off the table. Because sometimes the gift of having less is discovering how much more you're capable of. Epictetus told a story about a man carrying a fragile vase through a crowded market when it slipped and shattered. The man simply walked on without looking back. Someone asked why he didn't stop, and he replied, because the vase is already broken. That's the Stoic approach to opinions. Once you realize how little control you have over what others think, you stop treating their judgments like something precious to protect. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "It never ceases to amaze me. We care more about what people think of us than what we think of ourselves." Think about that. How many decisions, what you wear, what you post, even what you don't say, are shaped by the invisible weight of others' approval? Now picture a public figure like Eleanor Roosevelt, who famously said, "Do what you feel in your heart to be right. You'll be criticized anyway." She didn't ignore criticism, she simply refused to let it become her compass. Here's the truth: opinions are like weather, constantly changing, utterly uncontrollable, and far less important than where you're headed. So try this: grab a pen and write down one fear of judgment that's been whispering in your ear. Maybe it's, what if they think I'm selfish for setting boundaries? Or what if my idea sounds stupid? Then imagine handing that fear to the version of you who's already walked away from the broken vase. Because freedom isn't the absence of criticism, it's the realization that you don't need to collect every shard. The myth of multitasking crumbles under scrutiny. What feels like productivity is often just distraction in disguise. The Stoics knew this centuries before our buzzing notifications fractured our focus into fragments. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, warning against the half-lived life where effort is spread thin. To be everywhere is to be nowhere. That ancient wisdom aligns perfectly with what modern researchers like Cal Newport call deep work, the rare ability to immerse yourself completely in meaningful tasks without the constant pull of interruptions. Picture 2 artists: one paints while checking texts and emails, the other loses track of time as the world falls away around their canvas. Which do you think creates something timeless? Epictetus put it bluntly: if you seek truth, be prepared to give it your whole self. True mastery isn't about juggling plates, it's about holding one thing with both hands. Take coding, for example. The best programmers don't write genius algorithms while scrolling social media. They enter what psychologists call flow, where hours feel like minutes because their attention isn't divided. Here's the challenge: carve out 30 minutes today for what Newport calls monk mode. Silence your phone, close unnecessary tabs, and commit to a single task like Seneca crafting his letters, word by deliberate word. Notice how much further you get when you stop splitting your focus, because as the Stoics showed, depth isn't about having more time. It's about giving more of yourself to the time you have. How many parties have you attended just because saying no felt harder than showing up? In a world obsessed with FOMO, fear of missing out, the Stoics championed something radical: JOMO, the joy of missing out. Seneca saw this clearly when he wrote, "The crowd you despise can actually despise you first if you spend your life seeking its approval." He wasn't advocating isolation but intentionality. Take the ancient philosopher Democritus, who chose a quiet life in his garden over Athens' glittering social scene, not out of shyness but because solitude was where his best thinking flourished. His missed dinners and debates weren't losses, they were investments in depth. Today, we mistake busy calendars for full lives, but the Stoics remind us that every yes to others is a no to ourselves. Here's the litmus test. Next time an invitation lands in your lap, pause. Is this gathering aligned with your values or just another obligation disguised as opportunity? Try declining one non-essential event this week, not with guilt, but with the calm certainty of someone guarding their most precious resource, attention. Because presence isn't just about showing up, it's about choosing where you'll truly belong. Did you know the average adult makes around 35,000 decisions every single day? From what to eat for breakfast to which emails deserve a response, that mental load adds up and it's exhausting. Modern psychology calls this decision fatigue, the draining effect of too many choices on our willpower and clarity. The Stoics had a remedy for this centuries ago: simplify. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "Begin each day by telling yourself, 'Today I shall meet with interference, ingratitude, insolence, but none of these things can injure me.'" That wasn't just philosophy, it was a cognitive shortcut, a pre-made decision about how to face whatever came his way. Think of Steve Jobs, who famously wore the same black turtleneck every day to eliminate wardrobe choices. Or Barack Obama, who streamlined his presidential attire to navy or gray suits, explaining, "I don't want to make decisions about what I'm eating or wearing because I have too many others to make." These weren't quirks, they were strategies to preserve mental energy for what truly mattered. The beauty of Stoic routines isn't rigidity, it's freedom. When you automate the small stuff, meal plans, workout schedules, even designated times for checking email, you create space for deeper thinking and more intentional living. Here's the experiment. Pick one repetitive decision that saps your focus, maybe what to pack for lunch or which route to take to work, and turn it into a ritual. Set it in stone for just 7 days. Notice how that tiny bit of cognitive relief makes room for more meaningful choices, the kind that shape a life, not just a to-do list. Because sometimes having less to decide is the gateway to doing more that matters. Crates of Thebes, one of the most radical Stoics, once stood on a bustling Athenian dock with a bag of gold, his entire inheritance. Without hesitation, he flung it into the sea, declaring, "To perdition with you, vile tempters of human weakness." That moment wasn't about reckless abandon. It was a masterclass in what the Stoics called apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from unhealthy attachment. Epictetus later expanded on this, writing, "Wealth consists not in having possessions, but in having fewer fears, especially the fear of losing them." Think about that. How much mental real estate do we surrender to guarding, insuring, and fretting over things we could live without? Modern minimalists echo this wisdom like the couple who sold their suburban home to live in a van, not to escape responsibility, but to reclaim their days from mortgage payments and maintenance. Or the tech CEO who wears the same plain t-shirt daily, not as a fashion statement, but to neutralize the distraction of choice. Here's the practice hiding in plain sight. Pick one item you own, a jacket, a gadget, even a sentimental knick-knack, and give it away today. Not as a test of willpower, but as an experiment in noticing what changes when you prove to yourself that joy isn't stored in objects. Because as Crates showed, sometimes the richest act isn't gaining more, it's discovering how little you fear letting go. The clock ticks forward whether we watch it or not, yet how often do we live as if the present is just a stepping stone to some imagined future? The Stoics saw time differently, not as a river carrying us away, but as ground beneath our feet. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "Confine yourself to the present," a reminder that now is the only moment where action, and therefore meaning, exists. Contrast that with modern life, where we scroll through photos of past vacations while mentally rehearsing tomorrow's meeting, never quite landing in the day we're actually living. Seneca cut to the heart of it. We are given life, but it's not ours to keep, only to use. That urgency isn't morbid, it's liberating. Think of an emergency room doctor, trained to focus solely on the patient in front of them, their skill sharpest when the future is too uncertain to entertain. Or a musician mid-performance, fingers moving not by planning the next note but by fully inhabiting this one. The present moment isn't just a stopover, it's the only place where change happens. Here's a challenge. Wherever you are right now, pause and name 5 sensory details. The hum of your computer fan, the weight of your socks against your ankles, the aftertaste of your last sip of coffee. Not to achieve Zen, but to practice what the Stoics called proseuche, attention as the gateway to agency. Because the past is memory, the future is imagination, but the now, that's where your power lies. What would change if you stopped treating this moment as a bridge to somewhere else? Seneca's fiery words in On Anger still burn across the centuries. No plague has cost the human race more dearly. He wasn't just speaking about outbursts, he targeted that slow, simmering resentment we carry like a stone in our pocket, weighing down every step. Think of anger as a debt you keep paying long after the original transaction. The neighbor who wronged you, the colleague who took credit, the family rift that never healed. Each grudge compounds interest in stolen peace. Epictetus offered the antidote with brutal simplicity. Any person capable of angering you becomes your master. Not because they control your emotions, but because you've handed them the keys. History whispers examples like the feud between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. Years of bitter silence dissolved when Adams finally penned a single conciliatory letter. The response wasn't just reconciliation, it was liberation from a prison they'd built together. Modern research backs this up. Studies on forgiveness show reduced stress hormones, improved heart health, even stronger immune function. But Stoicism goes deeper than biology. It asks, who benefits from your bitterness? The answer is always nobody. Here's the practice hiding in plain sight. Pick one old wound you've been reheating like leftovers. Not the monumental betrayals, but the small, stubborn splinter you keep touching. Write it on a scrap of paper, then light a match and watch the edges curl to ash. No grand declaration, no confrontation, just prove to yourself that some fires are better left unfed. Because as Seneca knew, anger is the acid that damages the vessel more than what it pours upon. Seneca once described a merchant who survived a shipwreck only to realize the storm had stripped away everything but what truly mattered: his own breath, his hands, his will to keep going. In that moment of loss, he discovered a clarity that years of comfort had obscured. This is the paradox of adversity. It demolishes the walls we thought protected us, only to show us how little shelter we actually needed. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly in his Meditations: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Think of communities after natural disasters, neighbors who barely spoke suddenly sharing food, strangers risking their lives for one another. Crisis doesn't create kindness, it reveals the solidarity that was always there beneath layers of trivial concerns. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies show that people report higher life satisfaction after surviving hardships, not despite them, but because the experience burned away the noise. Here's the reframe hiding in plain sight. That problem weighing on you right now, the stalled project, the strained relationship, even the financial pinch isn't just an obstacle. It's a tailor-made curriculum showing you what deserves your focus. Like a sculptor's chisel, adversity doesn't destroy, it discloses the form within the block. So try this. Take one current struggle and ask, if this were my teacher, what's it trying to show me about where my attention really belongs? Because sometimes the best way to see clearly isn't by adding light, it's by letting the wind strip away everything that isn't anchored deep. How many times have you said yes in the moment only to feel the weight of regret hours later? That hesitation you brushed aside, the quiet voice whispering "this isn't for me," was your inner Stoic trying to speak. Epictetus put it bluntly, no person is free who is not master of their own time. His words cut to the core of a modern dilemma. We treat yes as the default, as if every opportunity deserves equal space in our lives. But here's the Stoic secret: boundaries aren't barriers, they're the scaffolding that holds up what truly matters. Take Warren Buffett's famous 5/25 rule. He tells his team to list 25 career goals, then circle only the top 5. The kicker: the other 20 become your avoid at all costs list. Not because they're bad, but because they're distractions in disguise. This isn't about being ruthless, it's about recognizing that every yes to something good is a no to something great. Imagine your attention as a spotlight. You can either illuminate one stage brightly or scatter weak beams across a dozen. The Roman statesman Cato the Younger embodied this when he refused even prestigious invitations if they clashed with his principles. His no wasn't rejection, it was reverence for his purpose. Here's your challenge. In the next 24 hours, decline one request that doesn't align with your deepest priorities. Not with guilt, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows that scarcity of yes is what makes it precious. Because as the Stoics showed, freedom isn't found in keeping all doors open, it's found in closing the ones that lead nowhere. There's a reason the Stoics kept skulls on their desks, not as morbid decorations, but as silent teachers. They called it Memento Mori, remember you must die. Far from being grim, this practice was their compass for living well. Seneca captured it perfectly. You act like mortals in all you fear, and like immortals in all you desire. That tension between our endless wants and our finite time is where clarity is born. Picture someone handed a terminal diagnosis. Suddenly, trivial concerns fall away, and what remains is startlingly simple. Love to give, work that matters, moments worth savoring. We don't need to wait for life to remind us. We can use death as a lens now. Imagine writing your own eulogy, not the one that lists your job titles or possessions, but the one that captures how you made people feel, what you stood for when no one was watching. That exercise strips away the noise, revealing the bones of a life well lived. A CEO might realize their legacy isn't in quarterly reports but in mentoring others. A parent might see that being present matters more than being perfect. Even Seneca practiced this, ending each day by asking, "Have I lived today or merely existed?" So here's your invitation. Grab a pen and sketch the eulogy of your ideal self. Not the person others expect, but the one you glimpse in your clearest moments. What would need to change today to make that tribute true? Because death isn't just an ending, it's the North Star by which we navigate the living. The story of Icarus soaring too close to the sun isn't just ancient mythology, it's a mirror held up to our modern obsession with pushing past every limit. Those wax wings melting wasn't failure, it was the cost of ignoring the wisdom of enough. The Stoics framed this as temperance, not as a restriction, but as the ultimate act of self-mastery. Musonius Rufus put it plainly, What good is a feast if you can't taste it, or wealth if you're too exhausted to enjoy it? That question cuts to the heart of today's hustle culture, where burnout is worn like a badge of honor. Consider athletes like Björn Borg, who walked away from tennis at 26 unbeaten because he knew glory wasn't worth losing himself, or Agnes Martin, the painter who stopped creating for 7 years when her art began feeling like repetition rather than revelation. Their power wasn't in endurance, it was in recognizing the precise moment when more would have meant less. This isn't about quitting, it's about calibrating. Your ambition isn't the enemy, but the refusal to listen when your body, your joy, or your relationships whisper this far, no farther. So here's the experiment. Pick one area where you've been ignoring those whispers. Maybe the side hustle eating into family dinners, the perfectionism turning hobbies into chores, or the scrolling that steals sleep. For the next week, set a deliberate stopping point, not because you've run out of time, but because you've chosen to protect what can't be regained. Because sometimes the bravest word isn't more, it's here. A tree doesn't cling to last season's leaves, it lets them fall without ceremony, making room for new growth when the time is right. That effortless rhythm of release and renewal isn't just biology, it's philosophy in motion. The Stoics called it living according to nature, not as wilderness survivalists, but as students of simplicity's deepest wisdom. Marcus Aurelius marveled at this in his Meditations, writing, "Observe the ants, the bees, the spiders, their perfect discipline within nature's order." He wasn't praising mindless instinct, he was pointing to the quiet intelligence of systems that thrive without excess. Modern science now confirms what these ancient thinkers sensed. Studies on forest bathing show that just 15 minutes among trees lowers cortisol levels more effectively than any meditation app. The rustle of leaves, the fractal patterns of branches, even the scent of damp soil, these aren't just pleasant distractions. They're reminders that we're wired for rhythms older than smartphones and schedules. Think of the Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku, where doctors literally prescribe time in wooded areas as treatment for stress. Or consider the humble dandelion pushing through cracks in concrete, not as rebellion, but as testament to the unstoppable force of unfussy persistence. Here's the invitation. Step outside today, not for exercise or Instagram, but to witness. Leave your devices inside, sit under a tree or on a patch of grass, and for 15 whole minutes, do nothing but observe. Notice how the wind moves differently through oak leaves than maple. Watch a squirrel's single-minded focus as it buries an acorn. These aren't just breaks from productivity, they're masterclasses in how little we actually need to be whole. Because nature's most enduring lesson isn't about addition, it's about trusting the genius of enough. Henry David Thoreau once wrote, "The price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it." That simple calculation changes everything, not just what we spend to acquire possessions, but what we surrender to keep them. The Stoics took this further, drawing a line between custodianship and ownership. Epictetus put it starkly, remember that what you call yours is merely on loan, like a guest staying briefly in your home. That shift in perspective from possessor to temporary steward turns our relationship with stuff inside out. Consider the tiny house movement where families trade square footage for freedom. At first glance, it might seem like sacrifice, but listen closer, they speak not of loss but of liberation. Fewer cabinets to fill mean fewer hours working to fill them. Less space to clean means more time to live. Even Marcus Aurelius, with an empire at his disposal, slept on a simple camp bed, not because he had to, but because he knew luxury often chains us with velvet ropes. Here's the litmus test. Picture your home engulfed in flames. You have 60 seconds. What 3 items would you grab? Not the replaceable gadgets or trendy decor, but the irreplaceable fragments of a life well lived. That list isn't just practical, it's philosophical. It reveals what you truly own and what owns you, because the things we cling to hardest are often the ones that, in the end, cling back. Seneca had a peculiar morning ritual. He'd mentally rehearse the worst that could happen each day, not to dwell in gloom, but to disarm disappointment before it struck. He called it Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. At first glance, that might sound like pessimism, but here's the twist. By anticipating setbacks, he wasn't preparing to suffer. He was ensuring nothing could surprise him into despair. Marcus Aurelius took it further, writing, "Begin each day by telling yourself, 'Today I shall meet with ingratitude, injustice, and incompetence.'" That wasn't cynicism, it was insulation. Imagine two travelers at an airport. One seethes at every delay, glued to the departures board, while the other pulls out a book, savoring the unexpected gift of time. The difference isn't luck, it's expectation. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies show that people who mentally prepare for minor annoyances report higher daily satisfaction than those who rigidly cling to perfect outcomes. The Stoics weren't advocating low standards, they were teaching the art of flexible resilience. Here's the practice: pick one upcoming event, a work meeting, a family gathering, even a commute, and deliberately lower your expectations. Not by envisioning disaster, but by releasing your grip on how things should unfold. Notice what happens when you trade the weight of must for the lightness of let's see. Because as Seneca proved, freedom isn't the absence of obstacles, it's the quiet confidence that you're ready for whatever comes. Modern life trains us to react at lightning speed, finger hovering over the send button the moment offense stings, tongue sharpened before thoughts fully form. But the Stoics mapped a different neural pathway, one where power lies in the breath between what happens and how we respond. Epictetus framed it as our most sacred space. Between stimulus and response, there is a gap. In that gap lies our freedom. That pause, however brief, is where wisdom whispers over impulse. Seneca took it further with his rule for speech. Let your words pass through three gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Imagine applying that filter to every email drafted in frustration or every heated comment left unsent. History offers masterclasses in this discipline, like Queen Elizabeth I, who perfected the art of strategic silence during volatile court debates, letting rivals exhaust themselves in arguments while she conserved energy for decisive moves. Or think of Nelson Mandela spending 27 years in prison without bitterness, emerging not with vengeance, but with the poised clarity that would dismantle apartheid without civil war. Stillness here isn't passivity, it's the martial art of emotional judo, using the weight of others' haste to your advantage. Here's the challenge: next time your pulse quickens, whether from a cutting remark or a traffic jam, implant a 10-second buffer. Count slowly in your head, feeling the heat of reaction rise and fall like a tide. In that space, you'll find what the Stoics treasured most: the quiet sovereignty of choosing your battles instead of being chosen by them. Lottery winners should be the happiest people on earth, yet studies show nearly 70% end up bankrupt within 7 years, and many report deeper misery than before their windfall. That shocking statistic isn't just about money. It's a flashing neon sign revealing how quickly our brains normalize abundance until it feels like baseline. The Stoics called this hedonic adaptation, the cruel trick where what dazzles us today becomes tomorrow's expectation. Musonius Rufus saw through the illusion centuries ago when he wrote, "We suffer not from lacking luxury, but from believing we need it." Look at celebrities swimming in excess mansions with unused wings, closets full of unworn designer clothes, even private jets gathering dust between flights. Their struggle isn't with scarcity, but with the haunting realization that no amount of more fills the cup when the cup itself has no bottom. Here's where Stoicism flips the script. Happiness isn't about acquiring things that lose their shine. It's about dismantling the belief that they ever shone at all. Try this experiment next time you feel that itch to buy, to upgrade, to chase something new. Press pause for 24 hours. Carry a notebook and jot down every time the craving resurfaces like a wave. Notice how often it ebbs on its own when you stop feeding it attention. That space between impulse and action, that's where freedom lies, because the myth of more collapses the moment you realize you were never hungrier, you were just conditioned to keep reaching. Michelangelo once said his famous statue of David wasn't created by adding clay but by chipping away everything that wasn't David. That's the essence of refinement through reduction, the art of uncovering brilliance by stripping away the unnecessary. The Stoics applied this same principle not to marble but to life itself. Seneca urged his students to become ruthless editors of their own existence. Prune away distractions like dead branches, what remains will grow stronger. This isn't about austerity for its own sake, it's about creating space for what truly resonates. Take Japanese wabi-sabi, the aesthetic philosophy that finds beauty in imperfection and simplicity. A single asymmetrical vase on an empty shelf carries more presence than a cluttered collection of flawless ornaments. It's the crack in the teacup that tells its story, the silent space between musical notes that gives melody its shape. Modern life bombards us with decorative excess. Throw pillows we don't love, apps we never use, commitments that drain rather than fulfill. But every unnecessary item isn't just taking up physical space, it's occupying mental real estate, whispering demands for cleaning, organizing, or maintaining. Here's an invitation with Stoic simplicity. Walk through your home today and find one decorative item, a framed print, a knick-knack, even a piece of furniture that no longer sparks meaning. Not the sentimental heirlooms, but the things you keep out of habit rather than joy. Remove it, not to a storage bin, but entirely. Notice how the absence doesn't leave emptiness but clarity, like morning light pooling on an uncluttered surface. Because sometimes the most elegant statement isn't what we display, but what we dare to let go. Chaos and order might seem like opposites, but the Stoics saw them as dance partners, the kind who step on each other's toes until they find rhythm. Picture two ships, one tossed by every wave, its crew scrambling to adjust sails while the other moves steadily forward, its crew trained to anticipate storms. That's the paradox of routine. What looks like constraint is actually liberation. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of an empire, anchored his days in rituals we'd consider monastic: pre-dawn meditation, journaling by candlelight, physical training before the business of state. His discipline wasn't about control, it was about creating space for what mattered. Epictetus put it plainly, no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me you desire a fig, I answer that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. Modern creators embody this truth, novelists like Haruki Murakami rising at 4 a.m. to write the same number of pages daily, or athletes like Tom Brady following exacting recovery protocols year after year. Their power doesn't come from sporadic bursts of effort, but from showing up when inspiration is absent as faithfully as when it's present. Here's where structure becomes alchemy, when habit carries you through resistance like a river carving canyons. So craft your own Stoic morning, not with rigid self-punishment, but with 3 intentional acts. Maybe it's 5 minutes of silence before checking your phone, a sentence of gratitude scribbled in a notebook, or deliberately making your bed as an act of order. These small hinges swing big doors, because the right routine doesn't cage you, it hands you the keys to your deepest focus. Why does holding the door for a stranger or paying for someone's coffee leave us with a quiet warmth? The Stoics saw this as no accident. Generosity isn't just moral, it's mathematical. The more we give, the richer we become. Seneca captured this counterintuitive truth when he wrote, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." That idea wasn't abstract for him. He routinely donated half his vast wealth to those in need, not out of obligation, but because he recognized deeper exchange. Every act of giving, he believed, tightens the invisible threads connecting us all. Think of the philanthropist Chuck Feeney, who gave away his entire $8 billion fortune anonymously. living in a modest apartment while funding hospitals and universities worldwide. Journalists called it extraordinary, the Stoics would have called it logical. Their concept of oikeiosis, the expanding circles of concern, teaches that our well-being is bound up with others. Like ripples from a pebble, each gesture of generosity, whether money, time, or simple attention, doesn't just move outward, it reverberates back. Here's the experiment hiding in plain sight. Today, perform one act of kindness so quiet even your left hand won't know what your right is doing. Pay for the next person's toll without being seen. Leave a book you love on a park bench with a note. Notice how lightness follows, not because you've lost something, but because you've proven to yourself that joy, unlike possessions, multiplies when shared. Because the paradox of giving isn't that it costs us, it's that it's the only transaction where both parties walk away wealthier. After 26 insights, one truth emerges like the sun through morning mist. Stoicism doesn't take away, it reveals. These lessons distill into 3 lanterns to light your path: detachment from what you can't control, presence in what's before you, and intentionality in every choice. Together, they form the alchemy that turns less into more freedom, more focus, more life. Marcus Aurelius captured it perfectly in his Meditations when he wrote, "The universe is change, life is understanding." That's the Stoic secret, not clinging to the riverbank, but realizing you're the river. Each insight we've explored today is an invitation to trade the weight of excess for the weightlessness of enough. Maybe it's the clutter you'll clear, the no you'll finally say, or the morning silence you'll protect like sacred ground. Choose just one, not as a test of willpower, but as an experiment in what happens when you stop chasing and start choosing. Tell us in the comments which insight will you put into practice this week, because the real measure of wisdom isn't what we know, it's how we live. If this journey resonated with you, join us for more timeless Stoic insights. Hit subscribe, and let's keep walking this path together, one intentional step at a time.